What is happening, everybody? It is Thursday afternoon, and it is time to do a little bit of a DraftKings Reignmakers breakdown. If you guys haven't checked out Reignmakers, what are you waiting for? It's week 17 of the NFL season, and you can still sign up totally for free by taking advantage of the Reignmakers starters pack that's available below in the description box. So if you guys click on that link, it is going to bring you to the DraftKings marketplace and give you access to a totally free starters pack of Reignmakers NFL cards. So you're going to get an entire set of cards for free that you could use to build actual lineups that could win you cash prizes. So take advantage of that link below in the starters pack if you've not signed up for Reignmakers. And also, as you come and like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Any questions or comments that you have for myself at all over the course of this show, throw them into the YouTube chat. I always read them all, and we answer any questions you guys have during the course of the show. So what I have on screen over here right now is the DraftKings Reignmakers projections that we have here at Stokastic.com. And it's going to be, a little bit of an interesting week. Week 17, we just found out that Russell Wilson, no longer the starting quarterback for the Broncos. In fact, expected to be cut by the team. And we've got Saturday Night Football. We've also got Thursday Night Football. We got Monday Night Football. So we'll be walking through the different slates here, and I'm going to start with Thursday Night Football. If you guys have any specific questions for me as we go or other things you want me to talk about, throw it into the YouTube chat, and I could definitely respond to that. One other note is that this is going to be the last DraftKings Reignmakers show of the season because, well, it's week 17. Week 18 then is, not the best fantasy week in general. Week 18 with all the scenarios with players being rested, and then there's going to be a lot of guys that are in key situations that there aren't even going to be Reignmakers cards of. So last one of the season that we're doing today. But let's start by looking at Thursday Night Football. And if you guys aren't familiar with the tool that I have on screen right here, this is a couple of things. It is our projections on Stokastic in here. If you look at the fantasy point projection, but then what we also do is we pull in data from the Reignmakers marketplace with the low asking price of each individual players. And from there, we could find out who some of the best values are on individual slates. So one other thing as well that's kind of interesting about this Thursday Night Football game, I believe there are no Joe Flacco cards. Let me double check to make sure that is the case. But with no Joe Flacco, who, by the way, Joe Flacco has been, I want to say incredible, but it's kind of relative to expectations as well, because it's not like Joe Flacco is one of the absolute best quarterbacks in the NFL right now, but he's playing very, very well, and that's way more than any of us could have expected from him. I mean, the Jets are playing the Browns tonight. Flacco wasn't even able to make it onto the Jets as like a third-string quarterback this year, and I think that now we would look at Joe Flacco as somebody who the Jets probably could have used to start, but let's see here. If we go and look at the marketplace, just double checking to make sure I'm correct that there are no Joe Flacco cards. And Joe Flacco is, it would help if I spelled his name right. Yeah, no Joe Flacco card. So not an option for tonight, Joe Flacco, which does kind of limit some of the options that we have for this Thursday Night Football game. So we got Browns and Jets. We could certainly consider some of the defenses in this spot, but let's look at the projections of the players who we do have cards available for. And there's a pretty big drop-off after Garrett Wilson, and that'll happen when we've got Trevor Siemian starting quarterback for the Jets. Not to say that it was some spectacular situation when Zach Wilson was the Jets quarterback, but he has more fantasy appeal than Trevor Siemian does because of his ability to run the football. And then also, I think Zach Wilson overall a little bit better of a quarterback than Trevor Siemian. It, once again, doesn't mean that Zach Wilson is a world beater or anything, but it's still a worse situation for the Jets, in my opinion, with Siemian at quarterback. So these are the players that I would consider to be most viable for the Thursday Night Football game. We have Garrett Wilson projected for 11.93 fantasy points, David Njoku at 12.15, Jerome Ford at 12.96, Breece Hall at 13.25, Amari Cooper at 14. If Joe Flacco was a card, obviously it'd be somebody's viable, but there are no cards for him. So what difference does it make? So now we have to consider of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players that we have. So not a whole lot that I'm putting in the bucket of being playable. Cooper, Hall, Ford, Njoku, Garrett Wilson, right? So we have to build lineups out of 4 players, and there's only 5 that I'm really considering viable. So a couple things here. Which player are we most apt to leave out of our lineup? And then the other part is, who do we want to go to in the captain spot? So the first player I'm going to eliminate from the captain spot is probably the one who you guys are going to be like, hey, but that's who I wanted to play at the captain spot. And that is Amari Cooper. So Amari Cooper is fairly projected as the best overall fantasy expected producer from this game. We have him projected for 14 fantasy points. The next highest is Breece Hall, 13.25. Here's the issue, though. Cooper just scored a gazillion fantasy points. He had, 250 yards and 2 touchdowns a week ago? Let me pull up the exact numbers that we saw on Amari Cooper. But what's going to happen now because of that game, and also because everybody's going to have him projected better than other players, is that he is going to be overwhelmingly the most popular player in the captain spot for tonight. And in the interest of us trying to differentiate some of our lineups, I don't think that Amari Cooper gives us the cleanest path to winning one of these tournaments today, because what's going to happen is there's going to be so many people that have like Amari Cooper, Breece Hall, Jerome Ford in the same lineups that if you're playing the same as well, then you're playing the serial number game, and that just becomes a really difficult game to win. So to me, the cleanest path to victory on this slate is being contrarian, which means maybe making some decisions that are a little bit suboptimal in terms of projections, but can still be optimal in terms of game theory. And by the way, the final stat line for Amari Cooper, I undersold him. I said 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was 265 yards on 11 catches for 2 touchdowns. So if we go ahead now and look at the other potential options, we've got Cooper projected for 14 fantasy points. His low core floor price is $1.84. Breece Hall, $1.79. Then we've got Jerome Ford here, 95 cents, 12.96. I kind of like using the low asking price as a barometer for how popular players are going to be, because if we see a guy like Amari Cooper, his low core floor price here is $1.84. Well, it means that people are buying him to the point where that got to be his core floor price, where somebody like Jerome Ford, who's only 95 cents, it means people aren't buying him quite as much. Therefore, we could reason to say that Cooper is going to be more popular. More people are seeking him. And then in addition to that, probably going to be somebody more people are playing in the captain spot. So with that in mind, if we look at the prices of all these players, I think Ford is the one that's going to make the most sense to give us the most upside for the lowest possible ownership in that captain spot tonight. Ford, low core floor price, only 95 cents. He also only projects 1 fantasy point worse in our projections compared to Amari Cooper. It's going to be Jerome Ford. I know the Jets' run defense is a good one, although with that said, the Jets' defense overall is pretty good. It's not like Amari Cooper going up against Sauce Gardner has himself an easiest matchup in the world. But it is a favorable game script for the Browns. They're favored by a touchdown in this spot. We expect them to be winning late in the game, which should set up for more running opportunities for Jerome Ford. So I'm going to look at Jerome Ford as a contrarian captain option. And then still, Breece Hall, Amari Cooper, David Njoku, as well as Garrett Wilson all make a good deal of sense. The player I'm most apt to fade out of this group is David Njoku. I know that he's also somebody who's gotten a lot more targets as of late from Joe Flacco, but I still think we have to take a step back, look at the bigger picture of these players, and it's like, who do we think is the better fantasy asset? David Njoku or Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson? I think that we have to say that David Njoku, not quite the fantasy producer of those other players on a week-to-week basis. So Njoku, the player I'm most apt to fade out of this group of players for Thursday Night Football. Let's go ahead and start looking at Saturday now. So Saturday, we have a Saturday Night Football game, not a full Saturday slate like we've had on other weeks. There's only going to be one game Saturday night, and it's a good one. Detroit Lions against the Dallas Cowboys, and we have some interesting things to talk about for this game. One of those things that we don't have to talk about is the superstar spot, because there's only one player with superstar eligibility, and that is Amon-Ra St. Brown. So we don't have to talk about any of the opportunity cost of playing Amon-Ra St. Brown, because there's no other superstars to consider. This is a slate that would be a little bit more interesting and have more talking points if CeeDee Lamb still had the superstar status, because CeeDee Lamb CeeDee Lamb opened the year with superstar status. It seems crazy to think now, but CeeDee Lamb was having a poor start to the season, so he lost his superstar status and no longer has it. And now he's the best fantasy producer that we have of anybody at any position. That aside, we don't have to consider CeeDee Lamb versus Amon-Ra St. Brown. Where I probably would have been at this, to be honest, is I probably would have liked going with a contrarian Amon-Ra St. Brown, assuming that CeeDee Lamb would have been more popular. We could play them both together now. No real big issue. So CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tony Pollard, that's your chalk for Saturday night. Those are the 4 guys that the field is all going to want to be playing. If we go ahead and look at the rest of the players and their projections, Jared Goff at 17.49. He is certainly in play. And then there's a pretty big drop off. And it's funny comparing the Saturday night football game to the Thursday night football game because we just looked at Amari Cooper project for 14 fantasy points as just by far the best fantasy option in that game. Whereas Jake Ferguson's kind of an afterthought on the Saturday night football game, and he's projected for 13.98 fantasy points. Just goes to show how much different game scripts and scenarios can make and how we evaluate these players. So in terms of guys like Jake Ferguson, Sam Laporta, they're definitely in play for the Saturday night football game. But with that said, these are more of like dart throw type plays. And by the way, Jahmyr Gibbs also goes into that boat. The players that I really want to prioritize are CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tony Pollard. All these guys project for north of 18 fantasy points. So we've got this core four of guys. That's your optimal lineup as well. If you're building lineups just based off projections and nothing else, CeeDee Lamb in the captain spot, Dak Prescott, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tony Pollard in the flex. Boom, there's your optimal lineup. Simple. But kind of like what we talked about before when it came to the Thursday night football game, we should try to find some ways to differentiate a little bit so we're not playing the same lineup that a ton of other people are playing. CeeDee Lamb, still a very, very strong option here in the captain spot, even if we're trying to be a little bit contrarian. But what can we do? I think that we could look at somebody like Sam Laporta or Jake Ferguson in that lineup. I'm probably a little bit more apt to go to Jake Ferguson because if we go to CeeDee Lamb in the captain spot, I do think we also want Dak Prescott in that lineup in the flex, and maybe we go Jake Ferguson as well so you get a double stack. And then from there, we need a player from the Lions. So Amon-Ra St. Brown is the one that makes the most sense. You could also consider Jared Goff. Jared Goff's low core floor asking price $229. Amon-Ra St. Brown $223. So with that said, I do prefer Amon-Ra St. Brown. He projects for more fantasy points for us. The price point is negligible. Amon-Ra St. Brown actually slightly cheaper. So he's going to be my preference between the two. Something else that's nice about the Saturday night football game, Lions, Cowboys, both going to be playoff teams. So we're going to get extra access to these players over the course of the playoffs. Whereas we're talking about like the Jets from the Thursday night football game, well, that's not a playoff team that we have to think about at all. So that's another reason also that if you're playing some of these contests and buying players on the secondary market, keep in mind that you're going to get utility out of them for more than just the next couple of weeks. So somebody like Tony Pollard, a very good value option, only 71 cents as his low core floor asking price, compared to Amon-Ra St. Brown at $223, Dak Prescott $324, and you're going to be getting Tony Pollard throughout the playoffs, or at least as far as the Cowboys go in the playoffs. So that's the way that I'm looking at Saturday Night Football. And once again, any questions you guys have, anything you want me to talk about, throw it into the YouTube chat. I'll read your question answered here on the show. So that is the Saturday night slate, but now let's look at the main slate. And I've already got up here the top stacks tool at Stokastic.com. If you guys aren't familiar with the top stacks tool, it's as simple as these are the teams that we're expected to score the most fantasy points on any given week. So for DraftKings, we have the team with the highest projected odds to be the top scoring team. There's two teams with double-digit odds, the San Francisco 49ers, the Philadelphia Eagles. One thing kind of interest here is that we do have Jalen Hurts and Eagles stacks projected for a massive amount of ownership on the Sunday slate. But let's go ahead and see what that means for Reignmakers purposes. I'm going to just look at all the slates. We'll look at the Eagles. We'll look at the 49ers. And then we'll look at the slate as a whole, go position by position to find the best available options. First, though, the Eagles. What do we got here from Philly? We've got Jalen Hurts projected for 25.3 fantasy points. A.J. Brown at 19.68. One other thing we have to note about Jalen Hurts is that he does have superstar status. So there's an opportunity cost. So we're playing Jalen Hurts at the superstar. Well, that means we can't roster somebody like a Christian McCaffrey in that lineup as well because the superstar spot is already taken. I typically do not like to use my superstar spot on a quarterback. You guys probably know that if you watch this show at this point in the season, been watching it as we go. But with that said, there are definitely situations where we can make exceptions to the rule. Will this week be one of them? Probably not, but maybe. We'll see when we look at all the projections. My gut feel, just at the overall look at the slate without looking too much at our projections, which we're going to do more in a couple minutes here, is that Christian McCaffrey is the superstar most apt to roster. But if we are looking at the Eagles, Jalen Hurts project for 25.3 fantasy points. Obviously a very lofty projection for a QB. He does make sense if we remove the consideration about the superstar status. And then we've also got A.J. Brown projecting fairly well. Then there's a pretty big drop-off. Devontae Smith, who's had a somewhat disappointing fantasy season, he's projected for 14.85 fantasy points. We've got DeAndre Swift at 14.9. I think this is a really good way to get access to this Eagles offense. We saw DeAndre Swift score nearly 2 touchdowns last week, and his low core floor asking price only 99 cents. For whatever reason, it's like the 1 yard line is a magnet for Eagles players to fall down at. We've seen the tush push work time and time again this year, but for it to be something that comes into play, it has to mean the Eagles get stopped at like the 1 or 2 yard line, which for whatever reason just happens constantly to this team. So DeAndre Swift scores 1 rushing touchdown last week, had a second one called back, and then ultimately we did see Jalen Hurts run that one in. But the point I'm going to make here is this. If DeAndre Swift hadn't been stopped at the 1 yard line like a dozen times this year, how much different would his fantasy outlook appear to be to people? I think it would be quite a bit different. So DeAndre Swift, I think he's undervalued at 99 cents. I like him at the running back spot for this week. And also, just like we were talking about with the Cowboys and the Lions, we're going to be getting utility from him throughout the playoffs. So DeAndre Swift, he is a cheap running back option that I'm liking for week 17. A.J. Brown, decent looking as a wide receiver option for sure, but he does lose a little bit of appeal because I'm not really dying to play Jalen Hurts this weekend because of the superstar issue. Devontae Smith, hard for me to trust him. Dallas Goedert, cool for the deep contest where you have to use a tight end, but for just the Sunday exclusive contest, just the Sunday main slate, we don't have to roster a tight end. There's a wide receiver / tight end spot. Hard for me to consider Dallas Goedert in that one. Next team at the best top stack odds, it is the San Francisco 49ers, 12.2% top stack odds. So let's go ahead and look at San Fran now. San Fran. All right, so one superstar here on the team, and it is a surprise, Christian McCaffrey. He is definitely, without a doubt, a worthy option to use your superstar spot on this week, and he's projected for 27.17 fantasy points. McCaffrey has scored in nearly every single game this year, also scored last week. He's been a fantasy monster. He's involved in the run game. He's involved in the pass game. He scores a ton of touchdowns for the 49ers, and he's been healthy this year. Something like in previous years that we've seen, particularly if you guys play yearly leagues, you play best ball, the reason that people have been hesitant to go to Christian McCaffrey with the number 1 overall pick in those formats has been due to injury risk in previous years. But he's been healthy ever since coming to the 49ers, and he's been an absolute stud for fantasy purposes. So Christian McCaffrey, he is my favorite overall player to roster at the superstar spot. If we look at some of the other players to consider from the 49ers, a lot of these other ones make sense as well, especially when you consider the 49ers are a team that I think all of us feel have a pretty good chance to make a deep push into the playoffs. If you guys look at the DVOA odds and projections, so I use that as, not the end all be all for football projections or for football data, but it is my favorite one to look at. And the 49ers by DVOA rate out as the best overall team in football to the point where they actually have projected like a 65% chance to make it to the Super Bowl. So a lot of utility that we're going to be getting out of these 49ers players going forward. And that's why we're seeing some of these core floor asking prices, even at this point of the season. McCaffrey going for $5.50. Brock Purdy, even coming off a weak game, $4.50 for him. But Purdy is a very strong quarterback option against the Washington Commanders. The Commanders are getting diced up by opposing quarterbacks the entire year. And that was before they traded away Sweat and Chase Young at the trade deadline. And now we've seen this team. I mean, they don't stop the run. They don't stop the pass. They get blown out constantly. We've seen them making a quarterback change for this week. And I mean, I don't know that Jacoby Brissett makes them considerably better or worse, but we do know this. If a team makes a quarterback change, it's not because things are going great for the team. So I think this is a spot where we could really see the 49ers bounce back after a loss last week and really smash the Commanders. So onslaught stacks of the 49ers, I like them. Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. Not saying to play all 4 of them in the same lineup, but you could certainly look at 3 of these guys in one lineup. The priorities are going to be Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, and Deebo Samuel for me. Let's see if there's any other teams with good top stack odds that we want to focus on. Not really. There's a really big drop-off after the Eagles and the 49ers. I mean, we have these two teams combined for nearly 30% chance to be the top-scoring team on Sunday. Next best is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Saints. And I don't know that's a team that I want to go out of my way to stack for Reignmakers contest. But let's go position by position now. Going to remove team filter. Let's go and look at QB. Oh, actually, I do want to filter by the main slate so we get some of the primetime players out. All right, so main slate. Top quarterbacks, most of them superstar status here. Jalen Hurts, superstar. Lamar Jackson, superstar. Josh Allen, superstar. But there's a couple of guys that we could consider here that have comparable projections that are not superstars. And this is also why when we look at running backs, why I think we should be considering Christian McCaffrey as our superstar spot. If we look at the quarterbacks here, Brock Purdy, while sure, projects less than Lamar Jackson, projects for less fantasy points than Jalen Hurts, it's 1.5 less fantasy points than Lamar Jackson, and it's 3 less fantasy points than Jalen Hurts. But now if we go ahead and we look at the running backs, look at the difference between Christian McCaffrey and the top projected non-superstar running back in Kyren Williams. It is a 7.5 fantasy point projection difference. So way different than what we're seeing at the quarterback spot. With that said, this is another talking point to why I don't want to burn my superstar spot on a quarterback. I want to go to somebody like Brock Purdy or maybe Justin Fields. And Justin Fields, you could play naked with all of his rushing upside. We saw last week Justin Fields right around 100 rushing yards, had some big plays with his feet. You don't have to play him with DJ Moore or any of his other pass catchers. You don't have to play him with Cole Kmet, who might not even end up playing. But it also doesn't really matter because Justin Fields can get there just with his feet and end up being the highest scoring QB. So Justin Fields or Brock Purdy, I think those are your go-tos at quarterback. Purdy's still my preference between the two because we're getting the utility out of him in the playoffs. But then also, there are skill position players I like pairing with Purdy. And while, like I said, it is fine to play Justin Fields naked, there is a scenario where it's just going to be easier to find upside with 49ers stacks when you're stacking them because there are so many individual 49ers players I like, and you're just getting more correlation there. So my preference at QB is Brock Purdy. Justin Fields, my second favorite choice. Running backs to consider. We've already gone over McCaffrey. I mean, you could just look at the projections, and anybody who understands, what the numbers on screen mean, it's just a no-brainer to go to Christian McCaffrey. 27.17 fantasy points, our highest projection on any player at any position for week 17, as it should be. McCaffrey's just been a beast this year from a fantasy standpoint. If you have a card of him, play him. Don't even think twice about it. But let's look at some of the other running backs to consider as well. Kyren Williams, if you have a card of him, cool. But if not, a little bit too expensive for me. We're only going to be getting 2, maybe 3 more games out of him. The Rams kind of a fringe type playoff team. And I don't know that I want to pay $7.25 as a core floor asking price for Kyren Williams. But I mean, McCaffrey is cheaper than him. Every other running back is cheaper than Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams is the most expensive core running back right now, and I get it. He's been great so far this year. There's also a limited amount of print number of his cards because he wasn't in sets to open up the year. So the scarcity makes him more valuable, but not enough to make him worth what I think his asking price is on the secondary market. So the ones that I am more considering, Christian McCaffrey, don't really want to play Saquon Barkley at the superstar spot this weekend. Rachaad White, also a pretty good consideration. The Buccaneers, pretty safe bet to make the playoffs at this point. And then also, if you compare like Rachaad White, he's projected for 18.36 fantasy points, so 1 less than Kyren Williams, but core floor asking price is about a quarter for Rachaad White relative to Kyren Williams. So you could buy 3.5 Rachaad Whites for the same price of 1 Kyren Williams. That's an investment I would prefer here in Rachaad White. So Rachaad White, Christian McCaffrey, those are my preferred running backs. Somebody else who's kind of interesting, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Isaiah Pacheco, still banged up. Jerick McKinnon also banged up. We don't know what that's going to mean for the Chiefs heading into the playoffs. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire, less than $1 as the core floor asking price for him. I think that's something to look at for sure. If you're looking for value, if you're looking for a really cheap guy to round out a lineup as a player you need to buy on a secondary market, CEH for less than $1, you could do worse. Wide receivers. See, we got it wide receiver. And then after this, we are just about done. So if you guys have any questions, there haven't been any that have come into the YouTube chat yet, throw them in now or forever hold your peace because we are going to be finishing soon. And if you guys haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. So Tyreek Hill, never a bad spot. No, I should say never a bad option for your superstar spot. But with that said, he's got a fairly difficult matchup against the Baltimore Ravens, and I can't prioritize Tyreek Hill over Christian McCaffrey. So Tyreek Hill, not going to be a priority for me this week. Our top projected non-superstar wide receiver, it is A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown projected for 19.68 fantasy points. Michael Pittman's a pretty interesting buy low option right now. We don't know if he's going to be in or out. He ended up sitting last game. Looks like he was going to be cleared to play. But now only 76 cents for Michael Pittman. He's going way overlooked by the field right now. So I definitely think somebody who is a good value at his price. But let's see, we got Regina in the YouTube chat saying that she just got the NFL lineup generator. What is the best stack type to use for the main slate? Yeah, so here, I'll pull up the lineup generator in a second here. I don't have anything else to add a wide receiver, by the way. A.J. Brown, Michael Pittman, those are your best overall options. Rashee Rice also, not a terrible one if you're looking for value. He's really somebody who stepped up for the Chiefs. But really quick, let's go ahead and look at the NFL lineup generator, and I'll walk you through some of the settings that I like for the lineup generator. Although I'm not sure if we have lineups set yet for this weekend, but we're about to find out. And Michael Pavlik also asking if he got the lineup generator, how does he access Discord? Does it come with the package? Yes, it does come with the package. So the easiest way to do it is after you sign up, email support and they'll get you in. And if anybody wants to sign up for any package at Stokastic, there's links for that below. The lineup generator is the most affordable package that we have at stokastic.com. And it's a really good value, really useful for people who are either new to DFS or somebody who maybe doesn't have the most time to build lineups on their own. But I'll walk you through, Regina and Michael for that as well, how it is you might approach this. So I actually like to pick all stack types, so you're getting a mix of different lineups. And keep in mind, these are all lineups that we do project as plus EV lineups. So I like going to all stack types, and then I like going to balanced lineups for the main slates. So those are the settings that I would pick for it. And then I would save however many lineups you're playing, save the ones you like, ones you dislike, you could discard. So maybe you're looking at this like, hey, you don't want to play Jared Stidham. Well, you could discard him. Then you might look at a Tyrod Taylor lineup. Maybe you like that. You save that. You could save up to 20 lineups, and then you could go to your view saved lineups. You could look at the players. I only saved one lineup here, so it's just going to be those players. And then from here, you could look at your different player exposures, the stack exposures in those lineups, and then you could export it to a CSV and just upload it directly to FanDuel or DraftKings. So that's an overview of how to use the lineup generator. If you guys want to sign up, use the link below and check it out. It also comes with access to Discord. So guys, thank you very much for watching. If you've not done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck in week 17. And if you want more football content from myself, Saturday, I'm going to be doing a Back to the Tournament Strategy Show with Neil Orfield. We've been doing live before locks on Saturday as of late, but only one Saturday game. So we'll be doing a full breakdown of the Sunday main slate. So Saturday afternoon, hope to see you guys there. Peace out.